This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
The Foreign Affairs Minister Ahmed Attaf has taken part at the headquarters of the UN in a debate of the high-level session of the General Assembly on the achievement of the objectives of the UN Decade for Sustainable Development. More airstrikes have been carried out by the Israeli occupation forces against the various parts of the Gaza Strip, killing and wounding scores of Palestinians over the past 24 hours. And the UN coordinator of humanitarian operations in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Bruno Le Marquis, has urged for more assistance to the millions of people affected by the conflict. Those were the headlines, and now the news in detail from Radio Algeria International. First, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the National Community Abroad, Mr. Ahmed Attaf, has taken part at the headquarters of the United Nations in New York in a debate of the high-level session of the General Assembly on the achievement of the objectives of the UN Decade of Sustainable Energy at the end of his working visit to New York. Mariam Bershi has more details.
A press release of the ministry said that the session was an opportunity to present Algeria's experience at the national level, as well as its efforts aimed at contributing to the achievement of energy security, both at the regional and international levels.
Algeria's contribution in implementing the objectives of the Decade of Energy is not only limited to its national territory, but goes beyond it to reach its immediate environment, both at the African and Euro-Mediterranean spaces. Algeria endeavors, in this respect, to strengthen international cooperation in order to achieve energy security through the following initiatives. First, backing the efforts of completing the Trans-Saharan gas pipeline. Second, connecting the national electric grid with neighboring African and Mediterranean countries. Third and last, contributing as a main actor in European structural projects, foremost of which South H2 Corridor project, which is a project that Algeria is realizing in partnership with Germany, Italy and Austria.
The Algerian diplomacy chief emphasized that under the wise leadership of the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, Algeria has made great progress in the field of energy, and notably in the implementation of the objective of the UN Decade of Sustainable Energy.
Allow me to affirm before this meeting my country's keenness to commit to achieving the objectives of the UN Decade of Sustainable Energy for all. Algeria has managed, under the leadership of the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, to make a significant advance in this field. With regard to the indicator of energy connection, the national electric grid is now covering 99% of the population, with a production capacity amounting to 25,000 megawatts, while the various programs for the distribution of natural gas have included 73% of citizens. Regarding the indicator of diversifying the energy mix, Algeria has been involved in new efforts to develop the exploitation of renewable energies such as solar energy. My country aims by 2030 to reach 30% of renewable energies in the energy mix, including through the development of hydrogen source. As for the performance indicator of energy use, Algeria has implemented an ambitious program for the rationalization of energy consumption by 10% at the 2030 horizon in comparison to 2020 consumption level.
بحلول عام 2030 مقارنة باستهلاك سنة 2020.
Mr. Attaf also underlined that Algeria reaffirms the importance of adopting a fair and equitable energy transition for all that guarantees the appropriate position of natural gas, which is the cleanest and most efficient energy source.
تؤكد الجزائر على ضرورة تبني انتقال طاقوي عادل.
Algeria reaffirms the necessity of adopting a just and equitable energy transition that gives the appropriate position to natural gas, which is one of the cleanest and most efficient energy sources and among the most practical and cheapest solutions. And this is what was reflected by the outcomes of the 7th summit of the heads of state and government of the gas exporting countries hosted by Algeria last March and which unanimously stressed the necessity of developing the natural gas industry in the world to meet the aspirations of both the producers and consumers of this energy product.
منتجي ومستهلكي هذه المادة الطاقوية على حد سواء.
On the sidelines of the session, Mr. Attaf held bilateral meeting with his Sierra Leonean counterpart, Mr. Musa Timothy Kaba, with whom he examined the efforts made by both parties to promote bilateral cooperation at the highest levels, in addition to strengthening coordination between the two countries as part of their status as non-permanent members of the Security Council. The Algerian head of diplomacy also spoke with his Iranian counterpart, Hossein Amir Abdurrahman, as part of a bilateral meeting devoted to monitoring the implementation of the conclusions of recent talks held in Algeria between the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, and his Iranian counterpart, Ibrahim Raisi, in addition to the developments in the situation in the Gaza Strip and the steps taken at different levels in favor of the Palestinian cause.
And the Speaker of the People's National Assembly, Ibrahim Boughali, has arrived to Muscat as part of an official visit to the Sultanate of Oman at the invitation of the Chairman of the Shura Council, or Lower House of Parliament, Sheikh Khalid bin Hilal bin Nasser al-Malawi. Mr. Boughali and the accompanying delegation was welcomed on their arrival by the Chairman of the Shura Council and the Algerian Ambassador to Oman, Mohammed Ali Bougazi. Finance Minister Al-Aziz Fayed has met in Washington with the President of the New Development Bank, Mrs. Dilma Vanna Rousseff, with whom he discussed the progress achieved in the process of Algeria's accession to this international financial institution. A communique of the Foreign Ministry said that the meeting was held on the sidelines of Mr. Fayed's participation of the World Group and the International Monetary Fund, which are currently being held in Washington. In this regard, Mrs. Rousseff stressed that the process of Algeria's accession is following its course based on the agreed timetable, and that the legal procedures and institutional arrangements for such a decision are in their final phase. The two parties also discussed the possibilities of future cooperation in financing projects of strategic and structuring development for the Algerian economy. And the governor of the Bank of Algeria, Salah ad-Din Taleb, has pleaded on the occasion of the 49th meeting of the International Monetary and Financial Committee held on April 18 and 19 in Washington on the sidelines of the spring meetings of the IMF and World Bank for the support of low-income countries and the relief of their debt. Chairing the group of countries, including Algeria, Ghana, the Islamic Republic of Iran, Libya, Morocco, Pakistan, and Tunisia, Mr. Talib estimated that the growth of low-income countries, most of which have little or no leeway for economic policies, is hampered by rising interest payments, which have doubled over the past 15 years, as well as the reduction of external financial support. Here in Algeria, and in anticipation of the next presidential election scheduled for September 7, several Algerian parties have organized meetings in this regard. The Algerian Party for Peace and Development held its constitutive congress last night in Algiers with the participation of more than 450 delegates representing 23 provinces. The party's statutes and political program were adopted during the congress. For its part, the Workers' Party held its fifth ordinary session of the Central Committee devoted to examining various national, regional, and international issues. The Algerian Muslim Scouts are organizing a meeting on environmental development from April 18 to 20 as part of the project on green innovations launched by the same organization. The Algerian Democratic Rally held a meeting of its National Bureau devoted to examining the participation of the party in the presidential election scheduled for next September 7. In turn, the Al Bina movement organized a conference to explain its digital communication plan in anticipation of the presidential election under the motto Explanation and Enrichment of the Digital Communication Plan for the Presidential Election. And a documentary broadcast by the Algerian television on Friday evening revealed the subversive plans of the terrorist movement Rashad and its direct links with international terrorist organizations and intelligence services of foreign countries hostile to Algeria, with the aim of destabilizing and sowing chaos in our country. Entitled Rashad, Terrorism and the Masks of the Assassination of Conscience, the documentary reveals with evidence and live testimonies the main objectives and the dark schemes for which this terrorist movement was created in 2007 on the ruins of the dissolved Party of the Islamic Salvation Front, a IS and the path of violence and clandestinity chosen by this movement, which preaches civil disobedience. The documentary shows the testimonies of dissident members of Rashad who benefited from the measures decided by the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, as part of his outstretched hand policy, and who revealed that the slogans which strongly emerged during the popular Hirak in Algeria in 2019 in favor of democracy and legitimacy actually hit dark malicious schemes of a group of mercenaries at the head of the movement. The latest report issued by the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crimes, UNODC, revealed that drug trafficking in the Sahel region is witnessing a sharp increase, specifying that cannabis, resin, one of the three most widespread drugs in the region, comes from Morocco, where an increase in production has been recorded. In a report entitled Drug Trafficking in the Sahel, Assessment of the Threat of Transnational Organized Crime, published Friday, the UN body points out that a growing number of racket cocaine seizures involving Sahel countries have provided evidence of large-scale trafficking across the region. UNODC report underlined that the quantity of cocaine seized in the Sahel increased to 41 kilograms in 2021 and 1.46 kilogram in 2022, the bulk being reported by Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. To the Middle East now, where more airstrikes have been carried out by the Israeli forces against various parts of the Gaza Strip, killing and wounding scores of Palestinians over the past 24 hours. Palestinian sources said the strikes hit the area of Deir al-Balah and the refugee camp of Nusayrat in the central part of the territory, as well as the southern town of Rafah, killing 37 people and wounding 86 others. This brought to over 34,000 the number of people killed since the Israeli army launched its large-scale operations on Gaza over 6 months ago. The Israeli acts of aggression and the disastrous humanitarian situation in Gaza were at the center of talks held today in Istanbul between Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan and the leader of the Palestinian Hamas movement. This came as the Palestinian Fatah movement hailed the European Union's condemnations of the Jewish settlers-related violence in the West Bank, including occupied Jerusalem, as a step forward towards the good direction. The movement spokesperson in Europe, Jamal Nazal, said the need for European dissuasive measures and genuine sanctions against the Jewish settlers and their illegal group has never been so urgent. Earlier, the EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs, Joseph Borrell, condemned the attacks and violence perpetrated by Jewish settlers in the West Bank and stressed that those behind such action must be held accountable for. In another development, the Barbados announced its decision to officially recognize the state of Palestine and reiterated its support for the two-state solution. It becomes the 11th member of the state or the 11th member of the Caribbean community to recognize Palestine. And the UN Coordinator for Human Rights Operation in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Bruno Le Marquis, has urged for more assistance to the millions of people affected by the conflict. During a visit to the eastern region of Goma, he stressed that the UN is not able to provide as the needs were tremendous. He added that more than 15% of the resources were already needed to provide assistance to 8.7 million of Congolese in the eastern part of the country on the fourth month of the year. Let's recall that the region is subjected to clashes involving several armed groups, notably the North Kivu region, where the M23 rebellion took control of the area. And in Ecuador, the mayor of Mining City in the southern part of the country has been killed. The police reported that it is the second incident of the kind within the last 3 days. The latest assassination also comes 2 days before the holding of a referendum on reforms aiming at fighting organized crime. And the mayor of Mining City in South Ecuador has been in Mexico, 2 candidates to the municipal elections of 2 cities were murdered in the context of a wave of violence against candidates for local office in the run-up to the general election scheduled for June 2nd. With this last piece of news, we come to the end of this news bulletin. Time now for our weekly program, starting with a program by my colleague Hannah Dalil devoted to the cuisine in Algiers. Will be followed by another program about Mohamed Rasim by my colleague Mazarilis. For me, I'll meet you again tomorrow for a fresh edition of our news bulletin. Until then, stay tuned to Radio Algeria International, and bye-bye for now.
Hello and welcome to Discover Algeria, a program in which we'll let you discover or know more about the Algerian heritage, to include history, traditions, popular beliefs, social rituals, celebrations, as well as many aspects of the Algerians' life dating back to the Berber or Amazigh era until the Muslims one. This week I wanted to introduce you the Algerian cuisine. The history of Algerian cuisine starts with the ancient history of African tribes when grains, starch food and yams were the common basis of a meal. Algerian cuisine is also known as Maghreb cuisine, representing the region north of the Sahara Desert and west of the Nile,